Hello, CISW members, and welcome to our first webinar of the new year. We're very excited and very fortunate to have an incredible webinar presenter and an incredible webinar topic to start the new year with some mindfulness and some different ways that we get to incorporate this into our social work practice and even hopefully our own lives and the lives of those around us and our communities. So my name is Alexandra Zanis. For any of the new people, I am the Social Policy and Communications Coordinator here at the CISW. Welcome. If this is your first webinar, we're so excited to have you and Happy New Year and welcome to our continuing education pieces as we go into 2020. If you are a long-term webinar attendee, just disregard this next little bit of housekeeping notes that I have. In terms of our webinar platform, we have a really incredible webinar platform. We're really lucky to use it. One thing I'll note is that everything on your side, everything in your window is customizable. So you can make it bigger, you can make it smaller, you can increase the size of the slides, you can use any of the functions and the widget screen below. And I recommend you use the full program and get used to it and try out the different things that this platform has to offer. One thing that I would also like to note is that this is going to be a bit of an interactive webinar in terms of the fact that you can ask your questions as they come to your head. Don't wait until the end of the presentation when we have time to do a question and answer period. So we're lucky enough that I'm going to be here moderating and we have enough support in terms of tech that while you have questions, please just type them into the Q&A section of your own screen, and then I will save them and stockpile them for the end so that we can start addressing some of the really amazing questions that everyone has in terms of offering up expertise and thoughts and perspectives on this webinar topic. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our webinar presenter. We are so lucky to have Dr. Diana Collick, who has obtained her PhD from New South Wales and Sydney, Australia, has her MSW from the University of Toronto as well. So Diana is a practicing clinical social worker with 20+ years of experience and has been a board member of the local chapter of the Ontario Association of Social Workers since 2005. So she's currently at Laurentian University and is a core member of the research group ECO, which is evaluating children's health outcomes. And she's also the SSHRC leader for Laurentian University. So Diana's research investigates the effectiveness of arts-based mindfulness and the groups in working for improvement of resilience and self-concept, particularly in marginalized children and youth. So the 12-week arts-based mindfulness group program she and her team have developed is called Holistic Arts-Based Programming, and we're really going to focus and dive into what this means and why it is so important for social work and social workers at varying practices. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Diana. Diana, thank you so much for joining us today, and I can't wait to dive in.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you for inviting me, and welcome to everybody watching and listening. Okay, so let's talk about mindfulness. So first, I just want to show you where I'm actually physically located, because some of you might not know where Sudbury is. So Sudbury is the largest city in northeastern Ontario. We're about a 3.5-hour, 4-hour drive north of Toronto. So, and I'm at Laurentian University, and I've been here since 2001. So I've been around for a while. All right, so since around 2005, I've been studying with my team the benefits of arts-based mindfulness group work. So we developed this program that we call HAP, which stands for Holistic Arts-Based Program. And I guess the sort of unique thing about our program is that it was developed from research with children involved with the child welfare system and or the child mental health system. And then we refined it again through our research. So this is just a little conceptual map that sort of describes our program. So everything we do is held together with a strengths-based approach. And then there's really three important components to the program. So it's not just the mindfulness, but it's the arts-based approach to teaching it, and also the group work that combines, I think, to produce the benefits that we see. So just really quickly, so the goals of HAP are to teach and facilitate mindfulness in accessible, relevant, and meaningful ways, to improve self-awareness and understanding and expression of feelings and thoughts and behaviors, to develop self-compassion and empathy, and to recognize and shore up strengths. So, and before we go any further, I'd also sort of just like to make the point that I think social workers have a really unique contribution to make to the whole field of mindfulness, because we bring a really creative, holistic, strengths-based approach to the work, and we also have skills in the purposeful use of group work. And also, I'm sure some of you have seen criticisms of mindfulness, you know, it being focused just on individual change or being commercialized and that sort of thing. And I think if you're a social worker, you're coming, at least in Canada, you're coming from a real anti-oppressive, anti-racist perspective. So we wouldn't agree with that. We would really teach mindfulness as about recognizing all of our connections and working towards larger changes. Okay. So let me show you how we begin to teach the concept of mindfulness in our program. So this is an activity called the Thoughts Jar. And I use this in my one-on-one work. I have a small practice that I maintain. So this is a really great way, even if you're not doing group work, to just start a session with a young person. So you just need a jar like this with some water in it. And you can see that it's full of sort of beads and these sorts of things. So I just have a container like that. So basically what we do in the group is we would ask all the youth to think about what you've been thinking and feeling today, and then just put that in the jar. So you know, I might say, well, you know, today I was feeling excited about doing this webinar. So I would put excited in the jar. So, you know, we go around until everybody sort of feels like they've added what they want to add. And then this sort of symbolizes our mind, right? And these are all our feelings and thoughts. So then, you know, all the youth sort of take turns shaking that jar. So, you know, we talk about how, you know, this sort of symbolizes, you know, that feeling when you're just overwhelmed and you have too much sort of going on in your head, and it's hard sometimes to identify what you're thinking and feeling. But if you let things settle to the bottom, so this sort of represents a mindful mind, you can actually look internally and identify what you're thinking and feeling. So this is really the power of mindfulness, this ability to make choices about your thoughts and feelings, because when you're like this, which could be an anxious mind, it could be an overwhelmed mind, it can be a distracted mind, you can't really make a choice about what you're thinking and feeling. So it's super easy to react, right? So that makes a lot of sense to young people. And like I said, even in my one-on-one work, this is just such a really great way to start a session. And it's amazing how much you can find out about what someone's day has been just by going back and forth. All right, so that's the Thoughts Jar. That's just a picture of the Thoughts Jar. Okay, so just a quick kind of overview of mindfulness for those of you who sort of are just learning about this. So mindfulness is really about accessing the present moment and really cultivating your attention to attend to what's happening right now. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking about what you're going to have for supper, or you're thinking about what you need to do after this webinar, you're not really fully present in this moment. So it's also, you know, about seeing things without this lens of negative judgment. And I'm going to say something more about that in a bit. So, and those of you who know mindfulness I'm sure know Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn's work. He's the person who developed mindfulness-based stress reduction, and he really brought mindfulness to North America. So his definition is often used as a foundation for a lot of work. So he describes mindfulness as activity that encourages awareness to emerge through paying attention on purpose, non-judgmentally in the present moment. Just a few more points. So when you read the mindfulness literature, you'll see that some people talk about it as a state and or a trait. So, and there's a lot of inventories these days that measure mindfulness, and some of them measure a disposition, some of them measure states. So probably all of you have states of mindfulness. You know, for some people that's about being out in nature, or maybe you do a sport or an activity or something where you really feel fully present and mindful. And I guess the idea is the more you practice, the more this can become a trait or a disposition. So it's really about a way of being in the world. It's been mindfulness has been secularized in the West. It's really about self-awareness, which is why it's, I think, so relevant for social workers. And there are really sort of two big approaches in terms of how to practice this. So there's daily life mindfulness, and then there's the formal practice. So often the formal practice is the mindful meditation and the mindful breathing. So this doesn't have to be complicated. Like, to do mindful breathing, you can just, you know, sit sort of comfortably in your chair with your feet flat on the floor, you know, put your hands sort of on your thighs, and, you know, you can close your eyes if you want, or you can sort of just focus on a point in front of you. And the idea is just to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, and just try to focus on that breath going in and out. But there are lots and lots of different sorts of meditations. There's a ton of stuff on the internet nowadays and on YouTube. You know, a body scan is a very popular sort of way to practice meditation. And then there's the daily life mindfulness, which is basically just trying to bring mindfulness to things you have to do in your daily life anyway. So this is really useful when you're working with a client who maybe just has such a really busy, overwhelming life, and they can't imagine adding something to their life. So when I'm working with someone like that, if we're talking about mindfulness, I might suggest, well, just pick one thing a day that you have to do anyway, so you're not adding anything, like washing the dishes, for example, and just try to do it that mindfully. So what would that look like if you're washing dishes mindfully? You know, that's about sort of bringing your attention to, what do the dishes look like? What's the water feel like? What's the soap smell like? Like really bringing your focus to that task, right? So it could be folding laundry, it could be having a shower, it could be, you know, maybe you're at work and you need to walk somewhere. You know, it could be just about, okay, I'm going to walk from here to there and I'm going to try to do it mindfully. So the more you practice, the better you get and the easier it gets. All right. I wanted to show you this because I think this just really shows how the youth we work with really get this whole concept. So this is a picture that was drawn by a group of 11, 12-year-old girls. And what we asked them to do when they were done the program is to draw the art and science of mindfulness. So this is what they did. So they drew their brain before mindfulness and then after mindfulness, after sort of completing the group program. So you can see before, they've indicated, you know, they were unfocused, maybe they felt out of control, judgmental, they felt dumb. And then after the program, you see that they've indicated non-judgment, they feel more in control, they feel more calm, more focused, more happy. So this really sort of, it just encapsulates the benefits that we find with HAP. And this is another one, but this was done by a group of women leaving an abusive relationship. So I had a grad student test out our program at the local transition house last year. So this, and so again, we asked them to do the same thing. And so what they drew here is, so you can see that's a thought jar that they drew, but the stick men are shoveling beads off their brain so that their thoughts and feelings won't cloud their mind, keeping it stuck in a reactive cycle. And then the liquid preserving the brain is calm, representing how practicing mindfulness helps their minds feel calmer and more clear. And then finally, each woman wrote what mindfulness means to them around the thought jar. So again, you can see words like calm, present, clarity, openness, that kind of thing.
This is really powerful, Diana. Even just seeing the control of emotions. Wow. Like, what an incredible, and the visual of having both those drawings before and after. That's really amazing. Anyway.
Yeah, I think they're really neat because they just really show what people have learned, you know? Okay, so when we sort of start to teach people how to try to focus on their breath, you know, especially with youth, you need some more kind of active, engaging ways to do that often. Especially if you're working with younger kids. When we started our research, we were working with 8 to 12-year-olds. So we had a lot of behavioral problems. We had a lot of kids who just couldn't sit still. So this is Take 5 is a really common one. You can find videos for Take 5 on YouTube and that kind of thing. But this is a good one to teach people to do. And I often teach people in my practice this. So this is just, you start here and you just, this is a breath in and this is a breath out. And then this is a breath in and a breath out. So you would just go up and down your fingers. And then figure 8, I really like figure 8 because I think it's a really, it's a very kind of grounding, meditative type of thing to do. So with figure 8, you draw a figure 8 on a piece of paper and then you just repeatedly trace it. So when you're going around this way, this is your breath in. So you breathe in. When you get to the middle, this is your breath out, right? So you just keep going around like that. So I know a lot of children that we work with really like this one. They can do it at school. You know, if you don't have paper and pencil, you can just trace it on your leg. You can use your imagination. But so those are two of the most well-liked sort of ones that we do. We also in HAP we have 10 different Tai Chi movements. So we teach the youth these movements as well. So if you are trained in yoga, if you have skills in yoga, that's another sort of really great way to do it as well. Okay, and then the other thing, maybe I'll just add before I go on to this slide is sometimes what we do too is if we're reading a short little guided imagery, we'll give the youth clay and we'll ask them to sculpt what they're imagining as they're listening to the reading. So that really kind of helps them, focus their attention and use their imagination, which is great. Okay, so I think it's really important if you're thinking about incorporating this into your work that you have to be teaching the concepts that go with mindfulness. So mindfulness is not just breathing. It's not just like a set of techniques that you pick up when you're stressed. It really is a holistic philosophy. So it's about living your life, being mindful of these concepts. So these, on this slide, these are the concepts as Kabat-Zinn has discussed them. So, non-judging, patience, beginner's mind. I'm sure some of you know what that is. That's just about like approaching something as if you've never done it before. So like with a kind of a fresh, open mind. This is another way to sort of describe those characteristics or concepts underlying mindfulness. So this is from a person, this is from a student's PhD thesis. So, again, you can see like acceptance, curiosity, non-judging. So let's talk about the non-judging a bit, because this is really, really common. I think almost all the youth we work with come in with negative judgments about their feelings, about themselves, about their thoughts. I'm sure you all work with people who feel guilty about feeling stuff, you know. So this is really a big part of what we do. So, you know, if you're a mindful person, you are not judging your feelings and your thoughts, right? You have more of an attitude of like wondering and being curious about, okay, so, you know, when you sort of develop the ability to understand, oh, okay, you know, I'm starting to feel anxious, then what you want to do is sort of ask yourself, okay, like, how come this is emerging? Like, has somebody said something? Was I thinking about something? Did I read something? You know? So yeah, so that's really what it's about. And there's a lot of researchers that work just in the area of self-compassion. So you can find lots of books just on self-compassion. There's specific meditations that are aimed to help people develop this self-compassion. And you know, that's just really about trying to have understanding for ourselves, like trying not to judge decisions maybe that we've made, but just really understanding, like, you know, who we were maybe at a particular time in our life and maybe why we made those decisions. Yeah. And I always, you know, tell my clients, like, when they judge themselves, it's really the worst thing they can do to themselves, because it's just a roadblock. As soon as you judge something, that's it. You can't sort of explore it. You can't do anything with it. Right. So generally a self-compassion meditation would sort of start with, you know, directing caring feelings towards yourself, and then you sort of move out. So then to loved ones, to acquaintances, to strangers, maybe somebody who's challenging in your life, and then to all beings, right? If we're going to do this in our program, we would usually start the other way. So we would start more with like the universe or all beings, and then work our way down. And I think that's just sort of consistent with a kind of a social work perspective. Okay, so let me show you how, I'm going to give you a couple examples of how we teach these concepts. So in our program, all the activities have a goal. So they, you know, are about teaching practices, helping sort of develop abilities to understand your feelings, express them. And sometimes the activities are aimed at sort of promoting discussion around some of these concepts. So this activity is called painting on a line. So to do this, what you would do is you would hang a string, and then you see there's papers attached to the string with clothespins. And then people stand up and they have to paint a picture on their page. But so you can imagine what happens when everybody's doing that, right? The papers are moving. And so if people are, you know, perfectionists, if they really have an idea of what they want, this can be really frustrating because you can't hold the page, right? So this really promotes discussion about control and about perfectionism, and sort of more going with the flow and non-striving. Yeah, so, you know, for example, one participant in our group, you know, shared that this activity really shows how you need to keep trying your best when there are challenging situations, because something good can come out of it in the end. So this is, yeah, so that's painting on a line. Bad Day Better is about teaching the concepts of acceptance and self-compassion and trust. So for Bad Day Better, what you do is you take a piece of paper and you fold it in half and then open it up. And then on one side of the paper, you paint what a bad day looks like. Then you fold it so that you have a mirror image and open it up again. And then you paint, you make that bad day better on the other side of the page. So this really, this is a well-liked activity. People in HAP really, really like this activity. And it really sort of promotes discussion about how we have the ability to, you know, to make our bad days better depending on what we focus on, you know, what we're, you know, how grateful we are and that kind of thing. So some of the comments that we've had about this activity are, you can do something you find relaxing, you can talk to a friend, you can think about a happy time. So what I want to stress is it's really, really important to discuss with the participants that having a bad day is a normal part of life, and that the point of becoming a mindful person is not to avoid difficult feelings, right, but to learn how to feel and express those in healthy and helpful ways. All right, so that's bad day better. Okay, so, and I'm going to show you some other examples in a bit. So just really quickly, you saw some of the benefits indicated on those drawings earlier, but if you look at the research that looks at mindfulness, these are often benefits that you'll find discussed in that literature. So there's a lot of different kinds of benefits. Oops. Okay, so this is a quote from a youth that shows how they kind of learn self-awareness and how to cope and express their feelings better. So they say, I learned a lot about myself and I learned about how I perceive things. I found other strategies to change those thoughts or alter them to be in a more helpful thought. Instead of something that is so negative, it gave me a chance to understand what is going on in my head and being able to stop and say, okay, I'm going down this path and I need to back up and find another route. So I really like this quote because it really shows, that this youth developed this awareness of how they were thinking and also the ability to, after identifying that, to actually make some choices, instead of getting stuck in their negative thoughts. So just a point about outcomes and benefits. So, what we find in HAP is a lot of the benefits are connected, right? So it makes sense that if a young person learns to pay attention enough, that they can develop some self-awareness, and then they learn to express these in healthy ways, that they're going to have better regulation of their emotion, right? And then if they have better regulation of their emotion, then they have improved responses to emotional events, which then in turn builds social and coping skills. So, and then making friends and gaining support can then lead to improvements of self-esteem and confidence, right? So I think that's how I've sort of written about some of what we're seeing happen through participation in HAP. So there's also, lots of people talking about what they call mechanisms of change. So, talking about sort of how does practicing mindfulness lead to change? How, if you do all of these things, how does that actually affect change? So, for one example, again, if you can train yourself to have control of attentional resources, then obviously that's going to benefit your learning and problem solving, right? And then also this ability to kind of notice your thoughts and not get wrapped up in them and not judge them can help you understand that, just because you think something doesn't mean that it's true, right? So it really can promote more flexible sort of thinking and more flexible responses, as opposed to getting stuck in ruminating. And I think that previous quote sort of illustrates this. Okay, so therapeutic presence. So this is a concept that's directly related to our practice and has to do with reflexivity and being a reflective practitioner. So it's really about your ability to form relationship with people in your work. So we know, from common factors research, for example, that looks at what creates change in people. They find that the therapeutic relationship accounts for, almost a third of change. So, people who practice mindfulness and are mindful and have their therapeutic presence, tend to be less distracted. They have greater ability to tolerate emotion and to be more empathic and compassionate with their clients. And then obviously with that self-awareness, you're going to have a really effective ability to deal with transference. So this is often a rationale for teaching mindfulness to social work students, right? I know for myself, when I really sort of was, started practicing this, that I definitely enjoy my work more, and I definitely am less distracted and less tired at the end of the day than when I think of myself at the beginning of my career. And if I am distracted, it's usually because I'm just overtired, but then I'm mindful of that. So I can notice that and bring myself back to the work. Okay, so, all right. So let's talk a little bit about why an arts-based approach. There are lots and really lots of reasons why an arts-based approach works really well. One of the reasons is the ability to engage participants, particularly children and youth. So we've had, we've been doing this work over 10 years, and we've consistently had a really low attrition rate from the program. So if we can get youth to the program, we can keep them there after they experience that first session. So it's very engaging. It helps you flatten power. So you know that you can never get rid of power, but at least in our program, the way we do it, the facilitators do the activities with the youth. So it's a more collaborative way of working. And arts-based activities are really effective in terms of teaching concepts, helping develop skills, encouraging nonverbal expression, and really fostering enjoyment and mutual aid in the group. They're fun, and so one of the things that I've really learned through doing this work is that people can learn really valuable skills and abilities, and they can make changes through the experience of fun. That change doesn't have to be painful. It doesn't have to be difficult and challenging. So it's funny because when I started this work, my own background was really in trauma. And so we knew we had to make the program fun to keep the kids in the program, to engage them and keep them coming back. But I remember initially being surprised at just how much fun they were having. And when we talked to the kids at the end of the program, almost all of them say, well, it's, the program's fun when we ask them to describe it. So that was learning for me. And, it brings enjoyment to our work too. A lot of social work is really difficult and really challenging. So this really, brings another sort of dimension to our work. Okay, so here's a couple of quotes from youth who have been through the program about the art making process. So, one is, it's really difficult for me to communicate as it is, and to be able to either write something down or communicate through poetry or through my drawings. Really, it definitely helps out. It has built my self-esteem. When I express my art on the paper, I just expressed who I am. I just learned more of how I'm feeling and what kind of person I am. Okay, great. So we have some time for me to give you some other examples of some of our activities. Okay, so Doodle Draw is a good one to start with, particularly if you're working with adults. It just kind of warms people up to the process. So Doodle Draw, you just doodle. So you could just say, okay, we're going to doodle for a minute, without lifting the pencil off the page. And then what you do after the doodle is you create a picture from the doodle. So if this is in a group members can kind of help each other, identify pictures in their drawings. Here's some doodle draws from a couple weeks ago. So, I said, I'll just backtrack a bit. I said it's particularly useful for adults, or sometimes I'll do this in my classes with university students, because a lot of older people have, the reaction is, well, I can't draw. I'm not an artist, I'm not creative. And you really have to stress that using arts-based methods is not about how well you can draw. It's really just a tool for expression, or a tool to explore something. So we're not artists, this is not art class, right? We're not teaching people how to draw. So you've got to sort of take some of that pressure off. Okay, so me as a tree. So me as a tree, this is one of our most popular activities, and I do this sometimes just as a get to know you type of activity if I'm doing training or work with my students. So basically you just draw yourself as a tree. So you can leave it that loose, or you can give more specific instructions, and you can ask people to think about what season their tree would be in, what would be around their tree. But the nice thing about this is everybody can draw a tree, and it's amazing how much you can learn about each other, and how much you will learn about each other in a way that you are not going to get if you just sort of do a go around and ask people to tell you something about themselves. You're definitely going to get different information and more interesting information. So here's just one example, of a boy who drew this and then talked about how, he has really felt cut down in his life, but you can see there's a little bit of growth, so that sort of indicates the hope he's got, that he's gonna grow again, he's gonna get better. This is a recent some recent drawings from one of our groups. So what these girls decided to do is to do one at the beginning, and then they decided at the end of the group they wanted to do it again. So these are their beginning and ending trees. So you can see what they drew when they started the program and what they drew when they finished. So, if you're supervising, you could even do this as a reflexive type of activity if you're supervising people. I've done this with students where they've done trees, like often when I have a student, they'll be training with me for over a year. So they've done trees at different points in the year, and it can really promote interesting conversation about their development and their growth and how they see themselves differently. Okay, so these are just some questions if you're sort of not sure, like how do you discuss, someone's drawing. So I find when I'm training students, this is the trickiest thing for people to learn, like how to ask really, really open-ended questions, or sometimes it's not even a question, it's just a comment. So, my advice would be try to avoid why questions, like try to avoid why did you use that color, or, because that's sort of what we want to know when we look at something. But particularly if you ask a child that, they'll just often say, well, I don't know. So, you could usually we just start in the group saying, well, tell us about your tree. And then we'll go from there. What kind of tree is it? Often, trunks, people will make their trunk really solid, or they'll make it not solid, or like roots are really interesting. A lot of people will draw a lot of roots, and it's always interesting to ask them. And they will often talk about if they feel rooted, what they feel rooted to. Does your tree make a sound? Sometimes trees look like they're moving, right? So you can just make a comment about that. Sometimes, if I'm working with a youth, and, sometimes you work with kids and they don't want to come in on their own, they're nervous or whatever. So I might have a parent in the session. I'll do this activity with them. And it's really interesting, the conversation you can have about the parent tree and the child tree. All right. This is Power Box. So again, this is something that I often use in my practice as well. So Power Box is basically you decorate a box, and then you talk about what gives a person power in their life, like what makes them feel in control, what makes them feel good. So then you can write these things on little pieces of paper and store them in the Power Box. And this is really nice because, when we do this in the group, the youth can take this home. And we've heard from parents that the youth often, they keep their boxes and they'll often go back into their box and sort of remind themselves of all their strengths and that kind of thing. This is a really interesting one that a couple of boys made in one of our boys groups. So what they did is they made their boxes to fit together. So you can see that no matter which way you turn the box, when you put them side by side, you get a different kind of picture. So that's just really nice. Okay, and Power Box, you know, that we developed that a long time ago. We from a group that we had that was really interested in Pokemon. And so, you know, we had this conversation, you know how all the Pokemon characters have different powers. And so, you know, we were having a conversation sort of about this. And then that's sort of where this activity came from, this idea. Feelings inventories, this is, you know, really simple. You can just have people, again, think about all of the feelings that they've been experiencing lately, and just, you know, children and youth are really creative. And they come up with all these different ways to sort of capture what their feelings. Inventories. Paint to music is a good one. Just to, you know, get people to start just expressing what they're feeling. So this one we did as a group. So often in the group, what we'll do is we'll do activities individually, and then as the group progresses, we might revisit an activity, but have the group do it together. So here you can see this paper is split into sort of 4 quadrants, and then 4 different kinds of music were played, and then the group just paints how that sort of music makes them feel. So often you'll see similar themes, and then you can talk about that, right? How music often makes people feel similar things. So that's a fun one. It gets people up too. If you've been, you know, if I'm doing training, I'll often do this after lunch or something, you know, when people have been sitting for a while, they get up, they can paint together. Group animals, this is also a really, again, none of these activities are complicated. They're simple, but it's amazing what can happen sometimes as a result of these. But group animals is just everyone in the group draws themselves as an animal, and then sort of, you know, identifies why they're that animal. So
Diana, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I just have one of our attendees is wondering if you'd be able to speak a little bit to some of the activities that would be best suited for younger students. I know as you're going through this, would you be able to flag some of these opportunities that would be really good for, say, like grade 3 and lower?
So we've so all of the activities. So our program, we've tested it with children from the ages of 8 to 17, 18. So right now we're working with youth from 11 to 17, but we've also done this with adults, looking for mental health supports, with women in the transition house, with university students, with teachers. So, and what I would say is we don't change any of the activities, but what happens is the way you talk about them obviously is going to be different, and the way the participants talk about them will be different. So with the younger kids, things tend to move much more quickly, and a lot of the discussion happens as you're doing the activity. So, you know, because young children they don't really have the ability to kind of sit back and reflect, right? Whereas the adults would. So it's more your conversation about the concepts and what's happening that is different than the actual activity, if that makes sense. So we haven't worked with kids younger than 8. So, you know, but again, I would just say, you know, you can use these activities, but the way you're going to describe them is going to be different, right? With the younger kids compared to the older. So it's more your discourse that changes with the different, but believe it or not, like the adults we've worked with they really like the program, and they really get into the activities. So it's, you don't really have to change the activities. At least that's been our experience. Yeah.
Great.
So I just want to show, I just have two more. So group symbol. So when you're doing group work, you are wanting to build group cohesion and mutual aid and all of that thing, and, you know, a sense of belonging. So we always do group symbol, which is a symbol of the group that the group creates. So this is one that actually the women, one of the groups of women that we worked with in the transition house did. So you see they've got a stop sign and all the things they want to stop around that stop sign. And then they've represented everybody in the group as a flower around the stop sign. And then this is one from a group of older girls. And they just kind of created this animal. And every part sort of, again, represents a different person in the group, but together they create this animal. All right, so yeah, so resources. So our program is the complete program is in my book. So if you want to try it out, then you can just follow along in the book. And we've also made a little video, a little 10-minute video of different students that I've had training with me and just their experience of learning mindfulness. So you can, that's available on my website or on YouTube. If that would be helpful, you can watch that. And then you can just, you know, if you're interested, you can follow our work. I try to regularly post stuff that's happening in our group on the Facebook and Instagram pages. So if you want to see more examples of activities, you can go check that out. So that's great. So that leaves us with a little bit of time for some questions.
Awesome. So we definitely have some questions. I will start off with one of the ones that was answered a little bit or asked a little bit earlier in our in the presentation, which is, could you maybe explain a little bit about the basis of your analysis of the arts? The question is it Freudian? Is it other? What is the basis of your analysis for this?
Okay, well, we don't analyze the art. So like when you're using arts-based methods, it's not about analyzing what somebody's doing. It's about using that as a way to help them maybe learn something about themselves, help them express themselves. You can see some of the activities are about building that group cohesion, right? So it's not, we don't analyze them.
Great.
And I think if you're using it in this way, it's really important to not make assumptions about, you know, if somebody has drawn something and there's a lot of black in it, for example, not to assume that that means something, that they're depressed or sad or whatever. I mean, there are templates that, you know, or ways to analyze art. Like if you're, and I know some researchers would do that, but in the practice, we're not doing that.
And just as a note for anyone that came a little bit late or missed my introduction, please feel free to type any of your questions in the question box here. We do have about 10 minutes of Diana's time, so this is fantastic. We do have quite a few questions, but please try and ask them now, and we will try and answer them if we can. So another really, really good question that was asked is, should the kids or youth or participants be calm before trying mindfulness exercises? The kind of basis of this thought process is, what do you suggest for kids with high energy and trying to kind of corral or calm them down before starting the techniques of this mindfulness practice?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a good question. They don't necessarily need to be calm. Like when you're doing the group work, every group is different. So like I can remember a group of sort of older boys that we were working with who actually would ask for the mindful breathing activities at the beginning of the group because they realize that does help them calm down. It helps them feel calmer. So that's great if that happens, right? If through that process of teaching, the kids realize, oh, this does actually help me calm down. Sometimes maybe doing some of the more active types of breathing activities, like the figure eight, for example, might help them calm down if that's what they need. Sometimes no matter what you do, the group just has a lot of energy. So some of the activities, they can use that energy. They don't necessarily need to be calm. They can go for a mindful walk, for example, or in the summer, especially if you're working with boys, like, they want to maybe do something more active. So we would take them outside and, we call it camouflage. It's basically hide and seek, but we would really ask them to be mindful when they're hiding, in terms of what they're noticing around them. So what we find sometimes is the kids will find like interesting rocks or sticks and stuff, and then bring them back to the group room after that and want to do something with them. So you have to kind of, as a group worker, right, you have to kind of adapt to sort of what the group is experiencing and feeling. But yeah, we certainly, like, I think the reason that the program has been, like, I think the reason we've experienced so much success with it is because it does have the ability to embrace a lot of diversity. So, like, we don't expect kids to be sitting still and listening before we do an activity, because that's not what a lot of kids are like, and that's part of the reason we're using these arts-based experiential activities, because kids who are like that, who maybe don't have good emotion regulation, they can still learn mindfulness, but they need a more relevant, active way to do that, because they don't have the ability to sit there and listen to instructions and focus on their breathing and that kind of thing. So I don't know if that kind of answers the question. I feel like I kind of was all over with that, but I guess I would say they don't necessarily need to be calm. I think sometimes through the process of doing the activity, they get that calmness.
Yeah. I mean, I'm even trying to think of myself. I personally struggle, and always growing up struggled with mindfulness, and especially trying to breathe and sit still and everything like that. And I found that throughout your presentation, it was really amazing to talk about the different ways that we can do that. It isn't just, sitting and breathing and, trying to calm and center yourself, that it can be a lot of hands-on and working, and that can be mindfulness too, without, being quiet or calm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like last night we just started a group. So it was the second session of a group, and they were doing this activity called Change 5. So what happens is one of the youth leaves the room and they change 5 things about their appearance. And then they go back in the room and people have to guess what is different. So, that's something you can do with a really energetic group. But it's about noticing, right? It's about paying attention, and how much we miss because we're not paying attention, where our minds are so distracted, right? So we have a lot of activities like that where you don't have to be sitting still, and that's the whole point of this, like to help kids pay better attention, to help them develop some self-awareness, right? So that they can sort of develop these skills.
Yeah. So I have quite a few questions actually about the training that you offer, or if you do offer specific training, if you offer it to professionals. Also, I have a question about if you have more examples of like what you gave us in terms of art-based mindfulness activities in your book, and if you have any for older adults as well.
Yes. Well, so the book, it's called Facilitating Mindfulness. So a guide for human service professionals. So, this is what it looks like. In the book, the last chapter is the program. So, every session is described and all the activities are described. So yes, it's all in here, all 12 sessions with all the activities we use. Yes, and then in terms of the training, yeah, I've definitely done lots of training. It's really on a like people just sometimes people contact me and they want training, so we'll set that up. So like I don't have like anything a formal setup, but I try to respond to requests to do training. So like a couple falls ago, I went to Grey Bruce County, and over 2 days met with a number of practitioners working in the schools and in mental health agencies in that area. And I know they rolled out HAP across a number of their schools and in their agency. So yeah.
And then any resources for adults? Maybe your book.
Well, like I said, we've done this program with 2 groups of adults, with the local mental health service, and we've done it with women, and it works great. So I would say, if you want to try it with adults, just do it. Like we've had success with it. It's worked for us. Yeah. So I don't think you have to, you don't have to kind of develop a whole lot of new things. Like I said, it'll just be a little bit different in terms of your conversations about some of the activities. And you might do fewer activities in a group because, adults have more of an ability to actually reflect and discuss things, and that they might want to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we probably have time for 1 or 2 more. So here's one that I think actually probably I'll have a couple people on this call that are wondering. So total understanding that a lot of these are best done with groups. Have you ever, or has it been successfully completed that you've done some of this one-on-one?
Yes. So like I said, I used a lot of these methods in my practice, like one-on-one with youth. Yes. So what I would use one-on-one is the thought jar. Me as a tree. The group animals I'll use in my practice one-on-one, but what I'll do is I'll often ask a youth to draw everyone in their family as an animal. So feelings inventories, power boxes, I do one-on-one. Yeah, so there's quite a few of these activities that I would use one-on-one in my practice.
Awesome. Here's a really good one actually that I had kind of wondered as well, that just got asked. Wondering if there's any limitations for social workers who don't hold an arts therapy degree or accreditation.
Okay, so yes, what I find is that sometimes there's reluctance, for social workers to do this because they haven't had any training. And like what I tell my students is, like, if you have skills like in assessment and, forming a relationship, you have a good set of skills. There's no reason why you can't incorporate some of this into your work. In fact, if you're working with youth, I think you have to, because you need to engage youth and you need to be communicating with them in a way that makes sense to them and that's relevant for them, right? So like when a youth comes in to see me, I have and this is like one-on-one, right? I have my table set up and we sit down and we start doing some of this stuff. They realize right away, oh, okay, this is going to be different than, sitting in the principal's office, talking and just using your cognitive brain. So what I would say is there are lots and lots of resources. Like there are lots of books out there that talk about how to use arts-based and experiential methods. If you want training, you can certainly find it. I often see workshops being advertised and that sort of thing. But yeah, like I really encourage people with especially social workers who have training to try some of these things. Yeah. And the more you use them, the better you're going to get at it, right? Like I said, with the students, it's often, I find the biggest challenge is, okay, so somebody's created something. Now what do I do? Like, how do I talk about this? It's just learning to really ask good questions that are going to promote conversation about whatever it has that's being created. Yeah. Right? But a lot of researchers too these days are using arts-based methods to collect data, right? And it often makes sense culturally, right? Because in some cultures, art is a very meaningful way to communicate. Or, people might not want to communicate with you using language, but they feel better doing that through these sorts of creative means. So like I said before, what we do are not, it's not complicated. These activities are simple. I think depending on the kind of work you're doing, I think we need to be making this part of our practices.
Absolutely. I agree completely. And I think it's exactly like what you said. The more times you do something, the better you're going to get at it. And I think that social workers can really speak to, it's very rare that we're perfect. But as many tools as we can have in our tool belt, and as many different opportunities we can to, pull out different techniques and tricks, pretty much like I'm getting flooded with comments just exactly saying that everyone who has attended this webinar is so grateful for these like really practice hands-on opportunities that we discussed and different techniques that we discussed. So I think that's it. We're at about 2:05. It's been about an hour, so we are going to wrap up. Thank you so much to Diana for this incredible webinar. I cannot believe how many people are so excited about all this work, and it will live on demand as well. So please feel free to share it with your networks if you learned something and want to share it. It's usually available about 24 hours, sometimes a little bit earlier, depending on how quickly it downloads. So please feel free to share that with us, and please feel free to get in touch with myself or Diana in terms of any feedback or how it's been working for you, how it's been working in the communities. And thank you again. We will see you next webinar.
Thank you. Good luck, everybody.